Welcome everybody to our panel today for A Crisis is a Terrible Thing to Waste. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Rahm Emanuel, the former chief of staff for Obama, but he is the one that coined this phrase. Obviously, we're in a crisis situation, so this is a great subject. So today we're coping with the digital pandemic economy. So a lot of big words, digital pandemic economy. So let me introduce our panel today. So first we have Catherine Garza. So Catherine, I'd like you to tell us who you are and who you're working for or who you're representing here today.
Catherine Garces. I'm the CMO of Andrea's Healthy Kitchen. It's a juice bar located in the city of El Monte.
Okay. And Mark Madrid.
Hello, everyone. Great to be with the CHCC today. Thank you for all that are viewing, and thank you to the CHCC. Mark Madrid, CEO of the Latino Business Action Network, and we're a national 501c3 nonprofit that collaborates with Stanford University to champion the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. Nice to be with you all.
Excellent. And Mr. Mark Herbert.
There we go, getting off mute. Had to be one in the group, right? That couldn't figure out the mute button. Mark Herbert with Small Business Majority. We are a small business education and advocacy organization. And really, we exist to make sure that businesses have what they need to take their next step on their entrepreneurial journey. And then we also do a bunch of policy work in DC, Sacramento. I get to lead our California work, and it's an honor to be here and appreciate the invitation from the California Hispanic Chambers.
Okay. And earlier I introduced myself. I'm James Duran. I'm the chair of the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce Foundation. I've been in that role for about 5 years now. My interest, however, is in public policy. So this is a great panel, and that will be my focus today, the focus I'd like to ask each of you to dwell on, to focus on public policy aspects of this issue here. So let's do this. Let's start by talking about what each of your organizations has done to cope with the economic crisis we've had in the last 9-10 months. So why don't we start with you, Catherine?
Yeah, so at the beginning of the pandemic, around March, we decided to shift our business so that we can be able to service to the community. We did a lot of raising money on the side so that we can provide lunch for our, nurses and doctors that were going through the problem with not able to be seen their families or be able to reach out to anyone. So we deliver a lot of lunches to them. We actually also reached out to the homeless and did a little bit of service to that. We had no choice but to shift. It was a time to come out to the community and see what we could do to provide for them. May came and our business we lost it to the fire. So that was another crisis, and we're going, what are we going to do? We had to now shift completely and reinvent ourselves. At that moment, we had no choice, but we had to keep going. We had our clients, we had our friends, we had media, we had support from everybody, knowing that Andrea's Healthy Kitchen has always been involved in the community. We named it. It was weird because this year, 2020, was the year of giving back. And let me tell you, the name stood with us because we had no choice but to keep giving back. We wanted to step in. We helped several moms and people in need. We didn't actually broadcast and we didn't want to share that with a lot of people, but as our clients were coming in, we were providing food for them as well, rice and things that they can take home so we can help them. At that time, we just wanted to be able to give back as much we were getting. It was a blessing. So it wasn't a moment to not only have the business survive, but it was also a moment to how do we come together as a family and how do we let everybody know that Andrea's Healthy Kitchen is there to provide a service, and to provide not only our healthy juices, but how do we become a family? How do we show others that not only is a business that is struggling due to a fire, but how do we show everybody else that we can be a team? And if we help one another, we can survive any type of crisis.
Excellent. Mark, how has LBAN fared in this period?
Well, first of all, Catherine, thank you so much for your ganas and resilience and always keeping that level of understanding, not only for your concern, but for others around you. Oh, goodness, James. So back in February or March, as the CEO of this organization, first I thought it was imperative to get with the board of directors and say, we don't know where this thing is going to go. Boy, did I not understand the fullness of that storyline. and what would ensue the next few months, including losing my dad to COVID-19 and almost losing my mother, and my sister was positive. But when it came back to the nonprofit and LBAN, we made a decision, a firm one at the very beginning, that we must pursue with all core initiatives of LBAN, which means funding the most comprehensive research in the US on US Latino and Latina entrepreneurs across the 50 states and Puerto Rico. And we must pursue both cohorts of our Stanford Scaling Program, which is for those entrepreneurs, Latinx, who earn over $1 million of annual gross revenues, because only 3% make it to that threshold. So in an arena where philanthropy was slashed, we thought we're going to make this happen because we have to be true to our purpose and to who we serve. And that is Latino and Latina business owners. As well as the pandemic persisted and evolved and intensified, we found another core purpose of ours was to guide the Latinos and Latina business owners through this navigation of confusion when it came to the Paycheck Protection Program. So it was our goal to mobilize those graduates of our program. And wouldn't you know it, those efforts paid off, because 82% of those graduates that were interested in the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program, received that funding. And so that gave us the winds beneath our wings to continue this work, to be creative with our fundraising, to go to corporate America and foundations that truly were walking the talk and supporting and investing in Latinx and Latino and Latina entrepreneurs. And so I can sit here right now, tell you that we've graduated one of those 2 cohorts in July. And currently we're on our 10th cohort with 79 Latino and Latina entrepreneurs, products of resilience and ganas. Keep in mind that our ultimate capacity is 80, and we have 79 going through this rigorous program during a pandemic, during confusion, during an outcome of election that is undecided, during a situation where we might not know the day of tomorrow in terms of our capital market access and management of capital, the pandemic, and or complications with the flu at the same time. So more than ever, we need to be here, be strong, have elephant ears, meaning listening, and not hippo ears, meaning doing all the talking, and actively supporting our Latina and Latina entrepreneurs. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
Do you have any data that you can report to us on EIDL?
Well, I have data that comes from the research that we fund at Stanford. The most comprehensive report that's been done on COVID, on Latinx businesses, is the ongoing impact of COVID-19 on Latino-owned businesses. So that's a robust sample size of 7,000. That is also a comparison between employer firms, Latinx, and employer firms that are white-owned businesses. What we saw with the PPP program is Latinos were approved at half the rate as whites. And in terms of the full funding requested that was actually granted, only 3% of Latino-owned and Latino-owned businesses received the full funding requested, as opposed to 7% with white-owned businesses. So we find that opportunity gap of actual acquisition of funding is still a gap that institutes and embodies a bigger problem when it comes to capital access overall. When it comes to the EIDL loans, what I found, James, and I'll be real quick because I want to hear from Mark as well, is we found that there's still some confusion about the EIDL grant versus the EIDL loan. The EIDL grant up to $10,000 that is available to small business owners as a product of what used to be before hurricane relief, for instance, that now applied to a COVID pandemic. But there is another debt instrument that could be available from the SBA. I should know because we received an EIDL loan. And it is quick, it is very automated, and you get the funds in a short time horizon. So I will have to tell you, just from being on the ground, that there hasn't been enough of our Latino entrepreneurs that qualify for this EIDL loan that have actually applied for one. And that goes without reason to say that have it in the bank.
Excellent. So moving over to Mark Herbert. Mark, I see emails, at least 2, 3, sometimes 4 a week from Small Business Majority. So even on with Small Business Majority.
Well, I appreciate that, James. And apologies if it's too many emails. We like to keep people updated in a very dynamic environment. But first, Mark, just want to extend our condolences on the passing of your father to this horrible disease, and appreciate you sharing that reality with us. I think it really helps ground this conversation and what we're facing here. And Catherine, just so appreciate your story. I work for a nonprofit that supports small businesses, but at the end of the day, you're the one that's on the front line here, right? You're the one who's experiencing this. And so appreciate your perspective and your story as we talk about policy and what that means. Yeah, I mean, you're getting a lot of emails, James, but really what started when this happened is as we saw this disaster unfolding, we put together a real quick webinar with some folks from the Governor's Office of Small Biz, a couple of our community capital lenders. So CDFIs are folks who make loans to under-resourced entrepreneurs. Quick webinar just to sort of help people start thinking about what to do as this disaster was unfolding. This was mid-March, early mid-March, and it overwhelmed our webinar system. It crashed because we had too many people trying to get on to get this information. And we realized quickly that we had to launch into high gear to meet this need where it was. Spent the weekend upgrading our webinar systems, figuring out our strategy for this year, and really launched into our COVID response strategy. And it's sort of there's sort of three phases that we identified, and in two sort of ways. So one, we wanted to address the policy needs. So what do we need to do at the state and federal level to make sure that entrepreneurs on the ground have what they need, like Catherine? And then two is what are the resources available now, and that we can make sure that we're helping to make sure that folks are able to access. And the sort of three phases that we identified are this emergency phase that began with people trying to figure out, what do I do? This is a new environment. This is crazy. And then that turned into a pivot phase of, all right, well, this is the new reality. It's not going away anytime soon. How do I retool and rebuild my business or change my business model to exist and to survive this new COVID economy? And this third phase where we are right now is really about sustainability. How do we bring all of the tools, both through policy and education, to make sure that entrepreneurs who are trying to make it every single day are able to get through this really hard crisis and be able to rebuild? So in that context, the emergency phase was all about helping businesses, as Mark mentioned, navigate PPP, navigate EIDL. It was so confusing. There were a lot of moving pieces. And congratulations, Mark, to that amazing success number for all of the folks that you work with. We hosted hundreds of webinars with chambers, business groups. We hosted a bunch with the California Hispanic Chambers, both in English and Spanish, reaching over 20 to 30,000 California small business owners, just with, this is what you need to know about PPP. This is what you need to know about EIDL. And as we sort of transitioned into this pivot phase, it really became about how can we support connecting folks with small business development centers, TA providers, amazing organizations like Mark's that help folks plug them into incubators to grow and get the resources they need. And now we're in this sustainability phase, trying to figure out what does that mean. And from a policy perspective, Mark is absolutely right. The disparities in who accessed federal relief are stark. And not just who got a loan, but to Mark's point, who got the full amount of what they deserved when they're applying for a loan. And that was true as we look at the data that we do see and we do have for entrepreneurs of color, especially Latinx entrepreneurs. And it's something that needs to be addressed as we start thinking now about a secondary PPP loan or secondary federal support. The state stepped in a big way. And they've put over $125 million into the iBank, which allows small businesses to access cheaper loans through CDFIs, community development financial institutions. We're working with the iBank and private investors to help create a California Rebuilding Fund. California Hispanic Chambers has been a leader in that effort to do that. We're going to be hosting a webinar with the California Hispanic Chambers in a couple of weeks. So James, you'll get some more emails from us that will explain sort of what the fund is and how you can plug in. But we really want to make sure that folks have access to this tool. And I think the biggest thing moving forward is PPP was good for the emergency phase, right? That was, your lights are going off. Can you hang on until you turn the lights back off? As we hit this transition phase, we realized that's not the reality of the situation on the ground. We're not flipping our lights back on into the business as usual. We need better policy, better strategies to be able to support businesses coming into this fall and potentially the spring. So even as we talk about federal PPP another round, we have to restructure the program. The program has to be structured in a way to actually meet the needs of entrepreneurs now as they are in this sustainability and survival phase. And so lots of opportunity at the federal level, hopefully, depending on how the election goes, to Mark's point. At the state level, we know the leaders are doing what they can. We hope this fund makes a difference. And we look forward to figuring out what are the next steps that we need to take to support entrepreneurs, both through state and federal policy, and make sure that entrepreneurs on the ground have what they need.
Excellent. So I'm going to mention 4 policy areas. They are PPP CARES Act is one, ACA Affordable Care Act is another. The recent census is looks like it's terminating prematurely, and CDFIs. So, Catherine, I'd like you to take any one of those and talk to me about what have we learned in terms of the policy decisions around that program as it may have affected you or as you may have witnessed in the greater LA area.
Well, in the PPP program, we were able to qualify for that. Unfortunately, we're still trying to develop the business, and employees is something that we can afford at the moment, but it was one of the things that helped us to know that having one employee at that time, we were able to provide for their family and keep her on board while, she was with us for a short time. Unfortunately, we're still waiting to see what we can do with those funds because we are also employees of the company. So we want to know how we can benefit and if it's okay. We want to be very respectful of the funds because at the moment we still have to provide, explanations if we are working in the business or we're working far from the business. Also with the grants, I wanted to touch a subject right there. The city of El Monte was very protective and loving of us. They stepped up to the plate and we were able to get a grant from the city of El Monte. We are very grateful to the city manager and the city officials of the city of El Monte because when all this happened, they stepped up to the plate and they wanted to see what they can do for us. And one of the things that helped us a lot was the COVID grant that we were able to qualify for.
I see. Mark Madrid, you talked about the utilization levels and the percentage that Latino businesses got. What did we learn from that experience?
Well, what we learned, and by the way, the name of that report, and I'll be happy if you just Google search me and you'll see my email address. But the name of the report is The Ongoing Impact of COVID-19 on Latino-Owned Business. And so I want everybody with their hands on that report because it's the most comprehensive. It's not a couple of hundred sample size. It is actually 7,000 strong. So it is robust. Now, there was a very important element of that report where the data spoke. And it said, what were the barriers in accessing PPP funding? And a super majority, the top 2 representations in that bar graph were lack of navigation and guidance. And that just hit me right here. In fact, when I was talking about it yesterday, it just brought me back to those months of March and April and May. And I got emotional about it because I just saw this massive confusion. And so what we need to do, first of all, is we need to pass that next CARES Act. This is the PPP is, to Catherine's point, and Mark's as well, this is not a loss of revenue loan. So the entrepreneurs need to focus on other things like how am I going to manage my remote work base? How am I going to get into the e-commerce world? How am I going to build a new social market of raving fans? Instead of wondering if their PPP forgiveness is going to be granted for a loan amount higher than $50,000. This should be done right now. This is completely political. Look, it's always going to be political, but you can come together and get this done. And I'm talking about PPP forgiveness for loan amounts equal to or less than 150,000, maybe 250,000 less. We also need that next round of PPP funding for those who are accessing it for the second time, meaning if their revenues are 50% or more decreased in levels of 2019. And for those who did not access it in the first place for all those reasons that we're talking about, it was just too much. I raised the white flag. I can't keep up with it. I'm running this business. I'm running this household. My kids are here in a virtual environment with their education. I don't have time to look at a link that says things have been updated since 3 hours ago, and you access the link and it's 36 pages. So what we can do is say, you know what? It's really important if you qualify for this next round of the CARES Act that it's as expeditious as possible for you, meaning that we declog all the clogging that was around the first time. And there's a lot of blame to go around, but it was every part of the system. So we're talking from the Treasury standpoint, SBA, the confusion with the banks, because sometimes the banks themselves are waiting for guidance from the SBA and how to tool up their engines. And then what we have talked about here, and I'll close on this, is the unleashing of CDFIs and MDIs, minority depository institutions, that they create a landscape to bank the underbanked. And I'm talking about businesses, so that they can keep receiving education to understand fully what they qualify for. I've seen something alarming too recently with our most recent cohort. There is a overwhelming appetite for VC and angel funds. What that tells me is, and a lot of these firms, by their very essence, are not VC and angel type companies. But what that's telling me is people are trying to be as proactive as possible, looking for capital, some of which haven't done so in an aggressive way for a good part of their business careers of owning a business. So we need to do a better part of educating. We need to step up like LBAN, the CHEC, the Small Business Majority, because to leave it up to others in terms of just pushing something, a big document, is simply not going to work for people that are fighting for their business lives and people in some cases fighting for their lives.
I have to agree with Mark. Going back to what he said, it's like a catch-22. We look at each other and we're like, wait, do we access the money? What do we do? Like, should we wait? Where there's something changed, and constantly the fear of not knowing what we're going to do. Yeah, the money's there, but if it's there and we can't touch it, what's the purpose of it, So the frustration of so many things and so many questions as a small business owner, the constantly change of, like you just said, Mark, is what's today versus what was yesterday? Can we access more capital? We're trying to grow a business. We're trying to help our economy, but I don't think we're being acknowledged enough of the effort that we're putting also as working with the community. We're providing a small business and we're opening the doors to our community and we're making an impact. This is the way that our economy can sustain. All the small businesses having the same complaint. They don't know where to go. They don't know, they're afraid to ask, one person because three different people have three different answers. So what is in reality a small business that doesn't have the blessings, for instance, that we have to be able to reach out to you guys? There's a lot of people that don't speak English, that they don't know what to do, and they're closing their business down. And it's sad because they can actually save the business, they can grow their business, and they have no idea because there is not enough information for the non-English speaking business owners.
Mark Herbert,
yeah.
You talked a couple of about CDFIs and their role in this. Can you expand a little bit more on that? Mark's already referenced them, but I think you have more information to share with us.
Yeah, first, let me just, if I could retweet Catherine and Mark's comments, I would. I think they're exactly on point as we think about the PPP and also the reality on the ground as it comes to TA navigating. I mean, exactly what is happening and what we're seeing and what we need to make sure that we're thinking about as we think about additional PPP or federal support. Yeah, I mean, and Mark touched briefly on CDFIs, and I think that is such a key piece of any sort of conversation about what does strategic recovery look like, but also what's happening right now, right? Community development financial institutions, if you're watching this and you're not familiar with them, Google them. They're fantastic. Learn about them. Chances are there's one in your community that you should know that they're there. These are nonprofit mission-driven lenders. So these are folks who do small business lending, specifically to folks who aren't able to get a loan through a bank or some traditional form of capital. The challenge is that these CDFIs are usually not, multi-billion-dollar corporations. They're smaller. They're community mission-driven lenders, and that means their balance sheets usually aren't as large, and they can't actually make as many loans as maybe they could. They also, because they're mission-driven and they're nonprofit, oftentimes they're making loans at a loss, right? They're not necessarily recouping the cost of what it cost them to get a loan out the door. So they have to fundraise from philanthropy in order to keep going. But they play such a critical role in our small business capital ecosystem. And I think this is a huge opportunity for us as a state, but also us as a country to think about what is the role that CDFI should play in the future. So there is some federal money that comes from the feds that should absolutely be doubled. And there should absolutely be additional liquidity for CDFIs in the future to make sure that they can make the loans that they need to make. And right now in California, I mentioned the California Rebuilding Fund. That's the problem that fund's trying to solve, is creating liquidity for these CDFIs so that they can make these small dollar loans. The other piece of a CDFI is often they do pre-loan technical assistance, or that pre-loan one-on-one counseling, helping folks understand, is this the right loan for me? How am I going to pay it back? What is the process and what are the business operations that I need to do to make sure that I'm actually able to get that money back to you and be successful in actually taking a loan out and paying it back? And that's why they're so critical and such a fundamental piece of the fabric of our lending marketplace. And so the challenge is the CDFI marketplace is really small. It's really only almost 2% of all small business lending is done through CDFIs, yet it's so critical and so important. So we need to see a massive federal investment into CDFIs to make sure there's more capacity. We need to increase the liquidity available for CDFIs so that they can make more loans. And we need to do that now, but we also need to think about that in the future. And the reason we have to do that is because it's not like businesses don't need this capital, and it's not like business owners aren't going to find this capital. Business owners are resilient, they're smart, they're savvy, and they're hunting down available capital. The challenge is that in our small business lending marketplace now, it is the wild, wild west when it comes to fintech online lending. There are some really terrible actors out there that offer horrible products to small businesses, but disguise them because there's no regulation, there's no transparency required. And so our concern is that as we see business owners become stressed this fall and potentially into the spring, we're concerned we're going to see increasing numbers of predatory online lending to small businesses. And that's why we need more CDFIs to take more of that market share. We need to support CDFIs in doing that, but we also need to make sure that we are promoting responsible online lending and creating more transparent lending so that small business owners can make good decisions for themselves. So there's a lot happening at the state level. The Department of Financial Protection and Innovation was just expanded through the budget to create more oversight in small business lending, which is great. We're members of the Responsible Business Lending Coalition. It's a combination of fintech lenders and mission-driven lenders and advocacy organizations, putting together a framework for how to do this online lending right, how to do it well. We think there's tons of innovative potential, but we just have to do it transparently. We have to do it responsibly. And there's actually a federal piece of legislation that Representative Nydia Velázquez, who chairs the Small Business Committee, just introduced. We're incredibly excited about the potential for that federal bill, and we'll be supporting that. California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce has been an incredible ally in supporting efforts at the state level, supported the DBO expansion, supported additional transparency legislation that passed a few years ago. And so it's been really fantastic to work with the California Hispanic Chambers. And we know that responsible lending, increasing CDFI capacity is going to be critical as we think about how to build back better and make sure we have a lending marketplace that actually meets the needs of small businesses.
Well, it's clear that, thank you. It's clear that after the election, maybe even a little bit before it, we may have more attention focused again on CARES Act 2, or what is yet to come here. So sooner or later, that's going to come home. My question has to do with strategy. We can talk until we're blue in the face about what we want, but let's talk strategy about prioritizing what we want and how we're going to get what we want. So I'd like to hear what your ideas are there. Let me start first with Mark Madrid.
Well, the priorities are, when it comes specifically to Latino and Latina business owners in California and across this great land in Puerto Rico, is we've got to make sure that our significance is not drowned out in the headlines. And that's exactly what's happening. Let's take a quick view of the Latinx segment overall. If you haven't heard this, I hope that you jot this down, whoever's viewing. Familia, but between 2017 and 2018, US Latino GDP was the fastest growing GDP in the entire world. And we are the 8th largest GDP in the entire world. So we are consumers. We are top of the line. We're not going to go anywhere anytime soon. When it comes to entrepreneurship over the last 10 years, in terms of new business owners over the last 10 years and percentage of growth, US Latinx, positive 34%. Everybody else, 1%. 34%, 1%. When it comes to our entrepreneurs, they're young. 1 out of 3 are under the age of 45. And let's talk about like Catherine, hashtag Latina Power. 42% of Latinx businesses now are run by Latinas. So we need to make sure that we're front and center and that we're armed with the research and the data. That's a core purpose of LBAN in terms of funding this research. So it needs to be out there, because without research, there's no force, right? So we were excited that our COVID brief that I mentioned before, the ongoing impact of COVID-19 on Latino business, was featured in a Joint Economic Committee report chaired by Don Beyer. So that's a start. We've got to get the data in the minds and in the hands of decision makers. Not only policy when it comes to governmental, meaning municipal, county, state, and federal, but it also means corporate America. Corporate America has to have these in their hands when it comes to something that the CHCC and LBAN think of very favorably. One of our favorite words in the vocabulary, procurement. Procurement opportunities. So we've got to fight to make sure that we are getting the opportunities through RFPs. But that's not all. We got to make sure that our Latino and Latina entrepreneurs are equipped for those opportunities, because it's just not about lowballing a quote in terms of a price. It's about having the true capacity. And we want to demystify that we don't have enough of a pipeline of these qualified, certified Latino and Latina entrepreneurs. That's not the case in California, as LBAN and the CHCC knows, and that's not the case across the 50 states in Puerto Rico. So those are the things that come top of mind, including the priorities that I aforementioned, which are making sure that we are loud about this CARES Act being passed, and being passed very, very soon, so we can have a navigation for this segment that, as I described, is an American economic imperative. It's just not about us lifting our own community. It's about the jobs that will be created. Did you know that of our prior research, which is a robust sample study once more, that 50% of the Latino and Latina entrepreneurs that responded said at least 50% of their employees are non-Latinx. And over 75% reported that at least 50% of their customers were non-Latinx. And 75% reported that they are in non-Latino neighborhoods. What does that mean? It's not only are we servicing our own community, but we're serving all Americans. So America, wake up.
Well, Catherine, as you probably know, 40% of Californians are Latino. Speaking on behalf of the Latino cohort of California, what are your thoughts with respect to strategy and priorities?
You know, Mark was making a lot of great points, but let me tell you something, going from the beginning, from the seed, like when you're about to start. I've come across many businesses, many Latino non-English speaking business owners. They don't understand terminology. They don't understand, procurement. They don't understand CDFI. They don't understand PPP. They don't understand how to apply for so many things. I think that is the main problem right now with a lot of Latino non-English speaking business owners. They don't understand a lot of the process that needs, because nobody's teaching them, because they're afraid. Remember, a lot of Latino families believe it's like, don't say anything, no pidas, don't, just do what you can, work harder, not smarter, which is like our Latino community need to understand that, it's not work harder, it's work smarter, not harder. But how do we do that? We need to start from the beginning. We need to teach our Latino business owners all these acronyms, all these paperwork, all these things that they need to, that's the strategy. How do we help our Latino small taqueros or little business, all these pastries that they're making, they have the potential to become big. But what happened here is that they don't have the resources. They don't have, the hand that they can reach out for help. And this is where we're lacking. I mean, I speak English, obviously, but what about the people that don't, that have the great mentality to be great and have a big business, but yet they don't have that help? When I talk to them and I say, oh yeah, the PPP, help and the grant, and they're like, ¿Qué es eso? What is that? So you sit there and you're like, oh my God, this specific business it's a gold mine, but nobody's reaching out and they're afraid to reach out. So what do we do to provide these resources? As dumb as they look and as little as it is, how much more can we help from the beginning, from the core? Because that is what's going to help them. Once they understand what they can reach out and everything they can, be able to ask for, I guarantee you all these businesses will not be struggling. More than 40% of Latino business owners are struggling with this. They don't know where to find help, and the help is there. The money's sitting there, but no, they don't know what to do. So how do we provide the services? I mean, we have to come up with a strategy, not only for myself, I've learned this. I grew up here, I have an education, but let's see how we can help those micro businesses that want to help. For instance, we try to help with Andrea's Healthy Kitchen. We try to post in our stories and see the little micro businesses trying to help and give them that boost, but we can't do much. We can't provide all this paperwork, all this information that they need. How do we get, Mark, this information? Like, you always want to help out. How do we do this for this micro businesses that need it? And then they have this business like our business that they don't know. They're just sitting there with their hands crossed, waiting to see how much they can sell for the day so they can survive. Meanwhile, there's all this money sitting there, but they don't have the information. They don't have the knowledge.
Mark H., what is strategy thinking going on over there at Small Business Majority?
Yeah, I mean, Catherine just nailed it, right? I mean, in terms of how we should be thinking about what the policy priorities should be as we think about the rest of this year, as we think about a stimulus package, as we think about rebuilding our economy. And there is a moment, right, and to the point that, right, there is a need here that is being missed in terms of communication, getting the word out. And that is being reflected in the amazing reports like Mark's producing over at LBAN, demonstrating and showing that there is this massive disparity that exists between what is available and what's actually hitting the streets. And we're in this moment where everyone's talking about small business. Now, politicians love to talk about small business, but very rarely do they actually do things that support small businesses, but folks like to talk about it. But we actually are right now in a moment where small businesses are actually getting much more than lip service. And I think it is incumbent upon us, so as a policy organizations, Mark's organizations, the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, as the state chambers of commerce, to seize this moment and say, these are priorities that need to be foundational to any next step, to any solution. And the data is critical, right? The data around the disparities that exist is critical. The disparities, Catherine, that you were talking about, the disparities, Mark, that is evident in your data to say, we have to do things differently. And there are a couple things that we're looking at from Small Business Majority in terms of priorities for our next stimulus package and what we need to make sure is in there. One is seizing this moment, driving this narrative, telling those stories. And we need more cash to Main Street, right? Catherine, your story about the grant that you got from the city, amazing. That's CARES Act money. We need more of that. We need more grant programs. We need more cash to Main Street, not a PPP loan, cash to Main Street. So that's one. Two is we absolutely need more PPP, but that's after the cash. And we need more PPP and we need more dollars on the street through the lending institutions. But they can't go through just the regular banking apparatus that it went through last time. The PPP was designed to go through banks. And we know that so many entrepreneurs don't have a banking relationship. And so that's why we need community lenders to get a bigger piece of the pie and then to be given the dollars to build the infrastructure to be able to get those dollars out the door. So we need to advocate for more lending capital there. And then the part about technical assistance, right? So there are small business development centers that get money from the SBA. We need to double or triple that investment in SBDCs around the country. And here in California. And we need the state to continue. The state, we were involved with the California Hispanic Chambers a couple of years ago to get a historic $100 million 5-year investment into the small business development centers here in California. And we fought to make sure that that was not removed, even though we were in the midst of a historic budget deficit, and that money stayed in the budget, right? So we know that California's stepping up to the plate. We want the federal government to step up to the plate. We need more money for TA, and specifically cultural competent TA, right? Identifying organizations that are already doing the work, and they may not be federally contracted, but that are doing the work locally. They should be eligible for resources so that communities have access to these federal dollars, because the data shows that that's what we need to do. The data shows there's a disparity, so we have to do things differently. And then the last thing I'll say is, and this is more for as we come out of this thing, as we think about what it means to be an entrepreneur, and what it means to then be able to have a quality job, benefits are a huge piece of that. And, you know, James, you mentioned the ACA. Here in California, we have a very robust functioning marketplace that the ACA created. The state stepped in and created additional subsidies for folks on top of the federal subsidies to make it even more affordable. We need our entrepreneurs to be able to have access to affordable health insurance. And if I'm a really small business and it's just really tough to offer health insurance, we need to still have systems in place where those employees can access quality, affordable health insurance through the Cover California. So we need to make sure we invest in that benefit. Here in California, there's a new program, that a piece of legislation that we helped pass that's now being implemented, that creates portable retirement products for anyone who wants access to it through their employer. It doesn't cost the employer anything. It's called Cal Savers. It's fantastic. We need to expand that and continue to make that more robust. And also paid leave. We need to make sure that everyone has access to paid leave. So we need to make sure we do cash to Main Street. We need to make sure we increase liquidity in the community lending space through CDFIs and other entities. We need massive federal investment into technical assistance providers and culturally appropriate technical assistance providers, even if they're not federally funded. And we need to make sure that we are thinking about how do we build quality jobs when we come out of this thing. And that's why the LBAN data is so important. It's helping tell that story. Catherine, that's why your story is so important. It's helping tell that story. We need policymakers to understand that this is the real impact on American small businesses, and the only way to solve it is to take these steps.
And Mark,
You know,
they need to reflect on it as not a cost, but an investment. So, you know, all the things you're describing, there's a perception there that it's going to be increased taxes to a certain base of the population. But if you think about it as an investment, then it changes our whole narrative about the possibilities. And Catherine, I just want to commend you for giving a voice to some of the voiceless when it comes to access to resources. And let's talk about the PPP program. It's for those who have employees. Think about all those solo entrepreneurs that make up most of our entrepreneurs. So thank you for raising that point, Catherine.
You know what? Another thing is that the big disconnect here, I'm going to tell you what the big disconnect here is. I come from corporate America, right? And it's my blessing as an entrepreneur now. But what about the entrepreneurs that never were faced or never were part of corporate America? And I think the disconnect here is that the money coming from corporate America or from all these entities don't understand these entrepreneurs that have never been in front of corporate America. They don't know the steps. They don't know what needs to happen and what needs to take place. So there's a big disconnect. There's two languages being spoken here, when they're trying to ask for help. These are entrepreneurs. Most of them lack education, lack information. So here we are, corporate America, trying to reach out. The money's going to stay where it is because, like I said, there's two different languages, not even only English and Spanish, but we're speaking English in two different languages. So how do we reach out to these people? It's just frustrating because I see it on the everyday when I talk to these small business owners. Mark, I'm very involved in the community. I'm always trying to reach out. I'm very about women empowerment and I hear all these stories every single day when they reach out to me, and especially on my radio show, I get all these questions that I'm like, look, I can't answer, but I can't sit there and help 1,000 people at one point. There is a disconnect in the language with corporate America and all the money coming out to these small entities that don't speak the verbiage and the language. How do we connect? How do we help these people to have access to that capital?
Yeah, but I would say that corporate America need to have a perception of value, right? Because they're not just going to go out there and say, if somebody doesn't,
I agree,
to have the traits or the know-how or or what's the expectation that they are going to be a thriving business at some point?
Mhm.
But if you have a value proposition, say this is a growing segment based upon all that data, and we build that way so that they can understand that, training these businesses in bulk will matter and create a value proposition for them. So I think that's part of the disconnect is respect and value attribution to this segment that we have described is so important to the ongoing prosperity of this country, bottom line.
Well, we are on the eve of an election here, and I'd like to think that things can only get better, but the past has shown me that things can get worse. So my question for you now is, will the old institutions serve us to get what we need, or are we going to need to reinvent them or repurpose them?
Well, I'd like to start because I have to say goodbye to my esteemed panelists today, and thank you, James, and the CHCC. But I think we need to latch onto a concept of be architects of our own solutions. Because are we going to wait around or are we going to do something? And I'll tell you what that means. Recently, I was part of a conference whereby it was a pitch competition for startups and tech companies. And the minimum prize for each of the 4 winners was $250,000. That's a long way from winning 5,000 or 10,000 in a pitch competition. And who created that fund were Latinos and Latinas. And they were giving it back and saying, I'm tired of you winning 10 or 20,000 when you need $250,000 or of $500,000 to revolutionize this industry. And you're Latinx and you're a millennial in some cases. So we need to do the same when it comes to pulling our interests together and combining our voices, creating funds, creating maybe banks of information for those, honoring those that you described, Catherine. So not only do we need to be more on the advocacy front, and which CHCC, Small Business Majority, they do a great job, and LBAN is here to support from the research side, but we also need to do business with each other and get business for each other. Get along with that BS that we're a bunch of crabs with the crab syndrome. You know what? We need to create a marketplace of Latino and Latina business owners purchasing from Latino and Latina business owners. I did that just the other day. I replaced 3 vendors and I chose to go Latinx in each of those cases. Imagine if we had the multiplication effect there, the multiplier effect, what kind of impact that would have. So I just submit for your consideration that we start thinking about what we can do ourselves and then focus on what we need to others to do as well through our combined voice. I think that's going to be very, very important during this next 12 to 18 months.
Excellent.
I agree with Mark. We need to stick together. We need to find our own providers that are from our same community so that we can grow stronger and, we can go further. This is the only way we can make an impact in the economy and show others that we are here to make a change and stay. We're here to grow. We have our kids, we have our families here. And more importantly, you know what? We can make an impact. So you're right, Mark. Let's stick together and let's see how we can work together with our providers, our vendors. And I think this is the best way to make an impact. I applaud you for that.
So, Catherine, we saw here in the Silicon Valley, we've had a rent relief program sponsored by the city of San Jose. They gave us $3.8 million to give to umpteen businesses. Over 900 applied, and we're going to give about 250 grants. But what was most interesting about it was the applicants. What we saw was literally 2/3 of the applicants were Vietnamese businesses. And in a city which is over 25% Hispanic, literally we saw just a little bit over 50 Hispanic applicants for these same loans. So the question here has to do with what's going on with the Latino community, that when we reach out, when we conduct outreach, we don't seem to be getting the response.
Fear. I think it's fear. It's lack of knowledge, is, you have to pay it back, but you have to do this and you have to do that. Like I said, I hear it every day. Most than anything, it's fear. We were taught not to ask. If you know that, it's part of our culture. How do we educate our community that we need to reach out, we need to ask? Maybe the reason why there's more Vietnamese and Asian, percentage is because we have to understand there's a lot of nail salons that are struggling right now. So those are the ones applying for the rent relief, you know. But then again, I mean, so are there Latino business owners that don't have the knowledge. They're just afraid. It's the big fear in the community. How are we going to pay it back? Are we going to do what time do we have? How much time do we have? What's the percentage? There goes back again, the disconnection of the language, not only in English, but also how do we provide these resources? Here's the check, and this is the explanation with the check. What are the requirements? How do we help you? How do we help you grow? So, I mean, yes, there's a lot of businesses that need the rent relief help. How are we going to help those business owners that don't understand because of fear? It's mostly because of fear.
Mark Herbert, we have the one of the largest SBDC programs here in the Silicon Valley, or we run the Silicon Valley. Our chamber does. So my question is, how can we make this program more effective, not only in the Silicon Valley, but the one we have also in the state? Because the SBDC program offers many of the kinds of services that we need to offer to reach out to our businesses to help them avail themselves of the resources that are available. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that we have a fantastic SBDC network across the state. I think more than anything, anyway, I would almost reverse the question and say, what can we as small business majority do to help SBDCs be successful? I'm on the advisory board of the NorCal SBDC network and work closely with a bunch of the other networks around the state. And we're always trying to think through how can we collaborate and how we can support. We want to be a tool in the toolbox of local TA providers, right? It's not on me to tell a local TA provider how best to engage local community. That's the job of the TA providers and the expertise that they bring to the table. But I want to be a resource. I want to say, listen, I have access to expertise on PPP. I have access to expertise on policy. I have access to the California Rebuilding Fund. We can leverage our network to plug into what the tools that SBDCs locally need. So any way that we can be used by SBDCs, we would love to be used in the tool. So I think additional collaboration and engagement is always important. And then two is making sure that state electeds and policymakers and city electeds understand how valuable SBDCs are in their local community, to highlight the role. SBDCs have amazing data. SBDCs can pull reports on how many business owners we worked with, the type of the increase in revenue we've seen, the access to capital that we've secured, the demographics of our clients. That is critical data to what we talked about with Mark in terms of the data that LBAN's collecting and the research reports that they're creating. That data helps inform how policies then prioritize resources. And I think the more that data can make its way to elected officials and the policymakers, I think SBDCs can continue to receive the support that they deserve, because fundamentally we need to invest more in TA providers, and not just SBDCs, women's business centers, PTACs, procurement centers, and training assistant centers, VBOX, the veteran business assistant centers. All these centers that exist deserve as much support as possible because they're the ones on the ground doing that work. So collaboration and identifying what are the resources that SBDCs can draw down to make their work more effective. Two, making sure that data is being collected and used in a way that tells a story about how successful and impactful it can be. And then three, making sure that we are engaging policymakers and stakeholders with that data.
Catherine, it's not even clear that we are halfway through this crisis right now. Here in the Silicon Valley, we're not talking about even going back to work probably until July 1st of next year. We are seeing failure rates anywhere from 25 to 40% in small businesses, not just Hispanic business, all small business. So, summarizing what we've been discussing today, what are your final thoughts with regard to making the best utilization of this crisis?
I think it's a time to reinvent ourselves. It's survival. We're in survival mode. What will we do? What can we do to make our business better and different? If we don't have the funds and we don't have the means, we have to find a strategy. We survived by the restaurants, they started serving outside, and that was another way to reinvent themselves. How is it that I think marketing can help you? Reach out to social media. I think it's very important for any business to understand that the power of social media via, yesterday I was watching a panel with TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn. Use those free services that can help your business be more out in the community so that you can grow. It's the only way we can do. We have whatever we have right now. We need to work with what we have. let's make dinner with whatever's left in the pantry, and let's see how we can reinvent ourselves. I mean, we don't have a choice, but I think as business owners, we need to find a means. We need to find a way. I think you need to put it in your head. How am I going to eat today, and how am I going to reinvent ourselves? More importantly, I think we have to do it with a lot of integrity and to make sure that our business stays the way, the way the reputation is about our business. But more importantly, is about reinventing. It's about street strategizing and seeing what can we do different? What can we do better? I mean, come up with something new, come up with something different. That way you can, your clients see. And since right now we have the perfect opportunity because there's not that many businesses that are still working. So what can we do so that our eyes can stay on our business so that we can keep growing? Later on, we'll figure that out. But as right now, we need to keep reinventing ourselves, not just every week, every single day. What's new? What can we do to make our business better? Like I said, marketing is right now one of the biggest keys. Use of social media, that's going to help you. It's free. So if you can make an impact that way, with Instagram and all those services, I encourage you because it's helped us in our business.
Thank you. Mark, one of the questions we've gotten here has to do with the question of sustainability. So we've talked about some of these programs like PPP, which basically feed us for today, but we have to learn how to farm and live over the longer term. What can you offer us as hope in the area of sustainability in terms of what our efforts should be over the next 9 months?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think every business is going to have to look hard at the business model that they have and decide how can this function in a COVID-19 economy. And every decision that an entrepreneur makes is going to be different. But one thing that can be helpful in that is really getting serious about your mission and your vision for your business. Where do you want to go? And build backwards from there. And I think working with a small business development center, I mean, you can go to the California Hispanic Chamber's website. They're an SBDC. They have resources for that one-on-one support. Also, we host a website called venturize.org. You can literally put in your zip code. Up will pop the local SBDC or TA provider that you can call to get help. Work one-on-one for free with a business expert and who can help you answer that question. How can I have a business model, right? Do I need to invest more in marketing? Do I need to change my product or service offering? Can I do it online? How does this work where I live? How does this connect with my community? So I think one is already your business model. Two is trying to identify, are there any grant programs available for you? So in Contra Costa County, just heard yesterday, they just launched a grant program for small businesses, right? Just launched it with CARES Act money. So you're still seeing new grant programs come online from different cities and communities and counties. And there might be resources out there that might be available to you. It's hard to navigate. So plug into an organization like CHCC. Feel free to sign up for our many emails, James. And we will happy to make sure that we're getting that information to you so that you can figure out so one is figure out your business model, get that free help with SBDCs or Women's Business Center. And two, just do a regional scan. What are the resources locally that I could leverage to help my business survive?
Excellent. A question was asked about SBDC Spanish-speaking capabilities. In the Silicon Valley, we have a Spanish-speaking SBD satellite, and they have a SBDC in Orange County that is also Spanish-speaking. In Sacramento, with CHCC headquarters office, we have the SBD satellite program there catering to the Hispanic community, the greater Hispanic community around the Sacramento area. So we have not expanded that to the state yet. That's my hope, that we will get an actual statewide Hispanic satellite, but we do not have that yet. So that would be the answer to that question raised on state capability. So I'd like to summarize by thanking our panel here, Mark, Catherine, and Mark Madrid, also with Elben, who had to leave for other commitments. And I hope that everybody who listens to this recording now or later feels free to call on Catherine or either of the Marks and talk to them personally. I think they have a lot of valuable information to share, and certainly I am open, as well as the SBDC team under the direction of Oscar Garcia in Sacramento. So thank you all for attending this seminar. Thanks so much.
Thank you.